We are definitely into the new year, and the content of the presentations is adjusting a little bit because the holidays technically are past. But now we want to make sure that when this year ends, we feel satisfied about what we did. So the emails, the videos, the announcements, everything that are going out are now dedicated to helping you figure out where you are and where you want to go, and in effect, getting yourself organized. So this first section is going to be, before you can fix it, you got to understand what you're fixing. And I want you to notice here that it says part 1 of 2. So today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about coming up with what you really need to do, and a very simple plan to start getting it done. And then I want you to take a couple of days before the next video comes out, because when the next video comes out, it's going to be more specific about, now that you've got your plan and you've considered where you want to go, how do you actually get there? So this first part is figuring things out. So let's take a look at it. Now, I'm a really firm believer that in order to solve a problem, you first have to understand what the problem really is. You have to make sure that you have all the right tools. So, for example, if you're not using the tools correctly, you're not going to go anywhere. And I really do believe there are two major universal laws. Number one is the law of gravity. You cannot ignore it. Try as you might, and some of us are trying really hard to prevent gravity from taking over us. The other one is what we call the 80-20 rule. And what the 80-20 rule tells us is that 80% of all activity is generated by 20% of all 80% of all results is generated by 20% of all activity. In other words, if you've ever been on a committee with 10 people, 2 of you do 80% of the work. And the reason that helps us here when it comes to weight loss is because if we're trying to identify the things that get in the way, we don't have to fix absolutely everything that's going to get in the way of us achieving our goals or our success. We got to identify what the biggest barriers are and maybe pick the top 20% and come up with a plan for those. And so this is something that I do in my live seminars, and it has been welcomed with a lot of really positive response. There is an attachment in this email that will give you this actual form, but I want you to see how we actually use it, because we need to identify those big issue problems that we face so we can devise a plan for just those. So on the form, what you see is several columns here. You see one that says habit trigger, severity, how often, trigger score, and trigger rank. And it looks more complicated than it really is, and you probably won't need all of the lines on the form, but there's enough there that what I want you to do is take some time and write down the problems that you have with regards to achieving your goal weight, or with maintaining it. So in this example, I have put down 4. Late night eating is a problem. If you eat, I'm using some of my examples, but if you eat late at night, that might be a problem for you. If you have a lot of socialization or parties or whatnot, maybe work parties, granted they've diminished since the holidays are ending, but maybe you got an anniversary, what have you. If you're going to go on vacation, that sometimes, or travel, presents a problem for a lot of people. Stress eating, just life in general. So I just listed 4 here. And then in the next column, what I want you to do is I want you to rank them as to how severe they are. And in other words, late night eating is a major problem for me. It's something I have to work on all the time. So I gave it a severity of 8. And these are just numbers that I put in here. Example being, maybe if you go to a party, and when you go to a party, you get in the whole party mode, and you just can't seem to control yourself at all. So maybe you give parties a severity of 10. It's a real big problem for you when you go to parties. Vacations, I used an example of 6. And these numbers are just examples. It's up to you to put your own numbers in there. So stress eating is a 9. So if we take a look at this right now, we might think that the biggest thing we need to work on is how to control ourselves during parties. However, the next column asks how often in the course of an average month this occurs. So for example, late night eating has a severity of 8, but it's almost all the time. It's almost every night. So it happens 25 times a month, whereby parties, maybe I'll go to a party 3 times in an average month, and maybe not even that. It might only be once. Maybe you only go to, 10 parties a year, so you would give it a 1. Because on an average month, how big is it? Vacations, well, geez, if we were going on vacations all the time, it would probably be really severe, but I go on maybe 1 day a month. Now, example, let's say you take a 2-week vacation every year, if you're that lucky. That would be like a 1. If you're taking a 4-week vacation, it would be like a 2. So understand what I'm doing. This is an average month. And then stress eating. How often is stress eating a problem? Well, I put down 20 days a month. So now what we have is not only how severe the problem is, but how often it happens in an average month. And then we multiply those two columns against each other, and what we come up with is 8 times 25 in the late night eating gives what I call a trigger score of 200. Parties, severity of 10, a really big problem for me, but it only happens a couple of times a month, so that's a trigger score of 30. Vacations, trigger score is only going to be 6. It's a relatively severe issue for me when I go on vacation, but it happens so rarely that the score is only a 6. And stress eating, again, happens with regularity. That's 180 because 9 times 20 is 180. So now what we see is in terms of how important it is to work on these different things, we rank them from the highest number to the lowest number. So the most important thing, if I want to follow the 80-20 rule, I would pick just one thing of these and say, this is the thing I'm going to work on until I have it more under control. And the thing that I would pick here is the late night eating, because that's got the highest score. If I wanted to pick 2, and they might even be related here, but if I wanted to pick 2, it would be the late night eating and the stress eating. So in this example, we are now just going to pick late night eating. That is the thing we're going to work on. That would be our goal. If we can control late night eating, we have probably got 80% of the issues taken care of, hence the 80-20 rule. So now that you've figured out what the biggest problem is, and take a little bit of time to do this on your form, put down everything you can possibly think of, be honest with yourself, nobody's judging and nobody's seeing it. But once we have the problem, then we can start to come up with some possible solutions. And that's what the next part of the form does. So again, it looks like the first part of the form, but in this case, what I want you to do is list all the possible solutions to late night eating. In my example, it's late night eating. So you could go to bed earlier. You could run 5 miles every single day, which would allow you the ability to eat late at night because you're burning off so many calories. Again, we'll deal with how practical these are in a second. You could plan to eat late at night and say, okay, well, I'm going to reserve so many calories or points or whatever you're doing so that you can eat late at night. And of course, the other thing you could do is you could put a bomb in the refrigerator that blows up the house. It would stop you from eating late at night. So like we did in the other form, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to determine how effective each of these would be. So going to bed earlier on a 1 to 10 scale is what we're doing here. I gave it probably about an 8, because if I went to bed earlier, I wouldn't eat late at night. Running 5 miles a day, wow, that's really effective. I would burn a heck of a lot of calories off. So I gave that one a 10. Planning my late night eating, probably worked pretty well. I gave that one a 6. Putting a bomb in the refrigerator, I gave it a 10. You blow up the kitchen, there's probably a very small chance you're going to eat. But then we get into the next column, and that's how likely, honestly, are you to really do this? So going to bed earlier, I'm like a little kid. I hate going to bed early, so I'm really unlikely to do that. So I said, well, on a 1 to 10 scale, I'm probably, honestly, I'll give it a 3. Running 5 miles a day, yeah, it's not happening. I gave that one a 2. I mean, I might, but I just don't think so. Planning my late night eating, yeah, I could probably do that, so I gave that a 6. Putting a bomb in the refrigerator, yeah, I'm not doing it. Refrigerators are too expensive, so are kitchens. So now what I do is, again, I have these 2 columns. I multiply the 2 columns against each other. So going to bed earlier, 8 times 3 gives me a 24. Running 5 miles a day gives me a 20. Planning late night eating, 6 times 6, although it's not as effective as the others, I am more likely to do it. And it's not about what you should do, as we've talked about before, it's what you actually will do. So 6 times 6 gives me a 36, and putting a bomb in the refrigerator, just a 10, because obviously that was a phony one anyway. Then I rank those. And what I come up with is the plan. If the problem I'm facing is late night eating in this scenario, the best thing I can probably do is come up with a plan for what I will eat late at night. And then what we're going to do in the next video that's going to be coming out, which will be in a few days, won't be too long of a wait, because I want you to go through this activity. I want you to figure this out. Share it on our website. Share it in the Facebook group. But come up with what is your biggest problem, and then what would seem to be the simplest solution. And many times people have told me they're very surprised by the results they get. And what we're going to do in the next one, just to give you an example of what's in store, is we're going to build a chain. We're going to take a look at what you are planning to do. In this case, it would be how do I plan my late night eating, and the steps it would take for us to get there. So that's what we're going to do next time. Again, there are several more videos still coming out before the program ends, and hopefully you will join us for a whole year-long program, which will keep this going right on into next year. But what we're going to do in the next one is we're going to start to figure out the incremental steps in order to make sure you're successful this year. So once again, this is Scott Q. Marcus, the founder of I Will Stay in Control and 21dayhabitchange.com. By the way, this would be a good time to sign up for 21dayhabitchange.com. There's a special promo code that is attached, which will save you 50%, and it'll help reinforce everything you're doing here. Please tell your friends about it. That promo code is for anybody who you refer, but you have to get there now. It expires in about 2 weeks. So once again, Scott Q. Marcus, glad you're here. Treat yourself special and have a happy new year. Let's make it a successful one too.